The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Birds were chirping softly outside the window as Angela Roberts poured herself a cup of coffee in her small but cozy kitchen. Her home was simple, warm, and full of love. The smell of fresh toast and the sound of the morning news filled the air. It was just another peaceful morning, or so she thought. Angela was a woman who believed in hard work, honesty, and kindness. She had faced her share of struggles in life, but never let them make her bitter. She worked part-time as a nurse's assistant, while her husband, David Roberts, was a respected community volunteer who often helped organize charity events. Together, they lived a humble but happy life. That morning, Angela was planning to stop by the bank before heading to the grocery store. David had received a check from one of his recent charity projects, a small payment from the organization he helped promote. He was too busy with community work that day, so he asked Angela to deposit it for him. She smiled and agreed, not realizing how that simple favor would turn into an unforgettable experience. Angela got dressed in her favorite blue blouse and neatly pressed pants. She tied her hair in a bun, picked up her purse, and slipped the check carefully into a small envelope. She double-checked everything, as she always did. She wasn't rich, but she took pride in doing things right, being organized, respectful, and polite to everyone she met. Before leaving, she looked at the picture of her husband on the living room wall. It showed David holding a group of children, smiling proudly during one of his community cleanup drives. Angela smiled too. He's such a good man, she thought. He helps so many people. I'm proud of him. As she stepped outside, the morning breeze brushed against her face. The streets were busy with people rushing to work, cars honking, and shops opening their shutters. Angela walked down the sidewalk with a calm heart, humming softly to herself. She had no reason to think this day would be any different from the others. The bank was only a few blocks away. It was a large, modern building with glass doors and shining marble floors. Angela had been there many times before, and the staff was usually polite. But today she noticed a new face behind one of the counters, a woman with short blonde hair and sharp eyes. She didn't think much of it and waited patiently in line. While waiting, Angela looked around. A young mother was filling out a form near the window. An elderly man was talking to another teller about his savings account. Everyone seemed busy but calm. The air conditioning was cool, and a faint smell of perfume drifted through the room. Angela held her purse tightly, her fingers brushing the envelope inside. She wanted everything to go smoothly. She wasn't someone who liked to cause problems or draw attention. She just wanted to finish her errand and go back home. As she moved closer to the counter, she smiled at the people around her, offering polite nods. She believed in spreading kindness even in small ways. When it was finally her turn, she walked up to the teller's window. The teller glanced up. Her name tag read Linda. Her eyes flickered over Angela's appearance, her modest clothes, her slightly worn purse, and then dropped to the check Angela handed over. Angela smiled kindly and said, "Good morning. I'd like to deposit this check, please." But Linda didn't smile back. She looked at the check as if something was wrong. She tilted her head slightly, her eyebrows narrowing. Angela noticed the expression but tried to stay calm. Maybe Linda was just new or having a bad day, she thought. For a moment, Angela's mind wandered to her husband again. She imagined him laughing with his volunteers, organizing supplies for the next charity event. He had worked so hard to earn that check. It wasn't about the money. It was about recognition for his efforts. Angela felt proud to be part of his journey. She thought about surprising him with his favorite dinner that evening, roasted chicken with mashed potatoes. Maybe they could watch a movie together afterward. The thought brought a gentle smile to her lips. As she stood there waiting for Linda to process the check, Angela had no idea what was about to happen next. To her, this was just an ordinary morning filled with simple plans and quiet hopes. The bank was calm, the light from the tall windows falling across the polished floor. A soft hum from the ceiling fans mixed with the low chatter of customers. It was the kind of ordinary scene people forget the next day. But for Angela, this would become the morning she would never forget. Because in just a few minutes, everything, her mood, her trust, and even her sense of dignity, would be tested. What started as a simple trip to the bank would turn into a powerful lesson for everyone who witnessed it. Angela stood there, unaware that life was about to show her both the cruelty and the kindness of strangers. And it would all begin with a single ordinary moment, one check, one teller, and one small act that would change everything. Angela stepped closer to the counter, still holding her calm smile. The teller, Linda, didn't return it. Her face was unreadable, the kind that could make anyone feel unwelcome without saying a word. "Good morning," Angela said politely again, placing the check on the counter. "I'd like to deposit this, please." Linda glanced at the check, her fingers hovering above it as if touching it might dirty her hands. Her eyes darted from the check to Angela and then back again. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Linda muttered, her tone cold. "Where did you get this check?" Angela blinked, taken aback. "It's my husband's," she replied softly. "He received it from the community organization he works with. I'm just depositing it for him." Linda raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Your husband, huh?" she said, her voice dripping with doubt. She turned the check around, inspecting it like it was a suspicious object. "You sure it's real?" The words hit Angela like a slap. The people standing nearby shifted slightly, pretending not to listen. But of course they were. Angela's heart began to pound in her chest. "Yes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's real. You can verify it in your system." Linda gave a sarcastic half smile. "Oh, we'll see about that," she said. Her fingers tapped the keyboard loudly, each keystroke echoing through the quiet room. She squinted at the screen, muttering under her breath. No record found under this name." Angela frowned slightly. "That's strange. The check is from your bank's partner organization. You can call to confirm." But before she could finish, Linda cut her off sharply. "Ma'am, we have procedures. You can't just walk in here with a check like this and expect me to believe your story." Her tone wasn't just firm. It was accusatory, as if Angela had done something wrong by simply existing there. Angela felt a lump forming in her throat. She wasn't used to being treated this way. She had always believed that kindness could dissolve tension, but this time it felt different, colder. "I'm sorry if there's any confusion," Angela said, her voice trembling slightly but still gentle. "You can call my husband if you'd like. His name is David Roberts." Linda let out a small scoff. "We don't make personal calls for verification," she said dismissively. "And honestly, this check looks off." She held it up between two fingers as if it was something filthy. Then, with a tone of finality, she said, "I can't accept this." Angela blinked rapidly. "What do you mean you can't accept it?" "It's issued by a verified organization, the same one that works with your bank." Linda folded her arms. "Ma'am, I said no. You'll have to take it somewhere else. Maybe the place you got it from can tell you what's wrong with it." Angela's lips parted, but no words came out. Her hands started to tremble slightly. She felt the stares of other customers. Some looked away awkwardly. Others seemed curious, even judgmental. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore, it was humiliation. She had done nothing wrong, and yet she was being treated as if she were some kind of criminal. Angela took a deep breath. "Please," she said softly, "just recheck it. It's in your system. My husband works with several community projects that your bank sponsors, I'm sure." Linda interrupted her once again, her patience gone. "Ma'am, I don't need a lecture. I know what I'm doing. I've been trained for this." Angela's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. Her voice, though fragile, still carried dignity. "I'm not questioning your job," she said quietly. "I'm just asking you to do what's right." But Linda wasn't listening. She sighed dramatically, picked up the check again, and looked straight into Angela's eyes with a cold, sharp stare. Then, with a sudden movement that made everyone in line gasp, she tore the check right down the middle, the paper ripping loudly in the stillness of the room. The sound was like thunder to Angela's ears. For a moment, time seemed to stop. She just stood there, frozen, watching the two torn halves fall onto the counter like dead leaves. Gasps filled the air. A woman near the door whispered, "Oh my God." Another man shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Angela's eyes widened in disbelief. Why would you do that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Linda shrugged coldly. "It was fake anyway," she said. "Consider it a lesson. Next time, make sure your paperwork is real." Angela felt the world tilt. Her heart raced, her cheeks burned, and a deep pain grew inside her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She wanted to speak, to shout, to demand an apology, but the words wouldn't come. Her hands trembled as she picked up the torn pieces of the check, her fingers brushing over her husband's name. The same name that had always stood for honesty, hard work, and integrity. For the first time in years, Angela felt small, smaller than the space she was standing in. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, refusing to break completely in front of everyone. Behind her, the whispers continued. Some people looked angry for her. Others just turned away, unwilling to get involved. The air felt thick, heavy with tension and shame. Angela took a slow breath and straightened her back. "I'll be speaking to your manager," she said softly but firmly. Her voice trembled, yet there was strength beneath it. The strength of someone who knew her worth even when others didn't. Linda rolled her eyes. "Go ahead," she said flatly. "He'll tell you the same thing, but she was wrong. Very wrong, because the next few minutes would change everything. Not just for Angela, but for Linda too. And soon, Linda would wish she had looked twice before tearing that check. The torn pieces of the check lay on the counter like broken promises. Angela stood still, her breath caught in her throat. The sound of that paper ripping kept echoing in her mind, and sharp, cruel, unforgettable. It wasn't just paper that had been torn. It was her dignity. For a few long seconds, no one said anything. The entire bank lobby had gone silent. Even the printer behind the counter seemed to pause mid-whir. People stared, eyes wide, some pretending not to, others too shocked to look away. Angela's hand slowly reached out. Her fingers brushed over the pieces of the check. She picked them up carefully as if handling something sacred. Her husband's name was still visible on one torn half. David Roberts, a name that meant honesty, service, and respect in their community. Seeing it split in two made her heart ache. She looked up at Linda, the teller, her eyes filled not with anger but disbelief. "Why would you do that?" Angela asked softly. Her voice was calm, but her tone carried the weight of 1,000 emotions. Linda crossed her arms, clearly unbothered. "I told you," she said coolly. "It looked fake. I was saving you time." "Saving me time?" Angela repeated, her voice trembling now. "By tearing my husband's check in front of everyone?" Linda shrugged. "It's my job to spot suspicious activity," she said, her chin lifting slightly. "We can't be too careful these days." Angela blinked, trying to steady herself. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes stayed fixed on the teller. "Do I look suspicious to you?" she asked quietly. Linda avoided eye contact, pretending to organize papers. The silence that followed was louder than words. From the line behind Angela, an older man finally spoke up. "That wasn't right," he said firmly. "You can't just tear up someone's check like that." Linda shot him a glare. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." But now people were whispering openly. Some nodded in agreement. Others muttered things like "unbelievable" and "that poor woman." The room's energy had changed completely. What was once just a normal day at the bank had turned into a moment of public injustice. Angela took a deep breath. Her voice was shaking, but she didn't shout. "I didn't deserve this," she said softly. "All I asked was for you to do your job with respect." Linda rolled her eyes. "I did my job, ma'am. If you don't like it, you can speak to the manager." Angela nodded slowly. "I will." She turned to walk away, clutching the torn check in her hand. But her heart felt heavier than ever. Each step away from that counter felt like walking through mud, thick with pain, humiliation, and disbelief. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. She could feel every pair of eyes following her. A young woman near the door gave her a sympathetic smile, but Angela could barely look up. She just wanted to leave, to breathe, to escape this moment that had cut deeper than words ever could. At that very moment, the branch manager, a middle-aged man named Mr. Collins, stepped out from his glass office. He had heard part of the commotion and could sense the tension in the air. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" he asked kindly, walking toward Angela. Angela hesitated, then turned to him. Her eyes were glassy, her voice low. "Yes," she said. "There's a problem." She opened her hand, showing the torn pieces of the check. The sight made the manager's face change instantly. He glanced at Linda, his brows knitting together in disbelief. "Did you tear this check?" he asked. Linda crossed her arms again. "It looked fake, sir. I was just protecting the bank." Mr. Collins took a deep breath and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Linda," he said, trying to keep calm, "we don't tear customer checks. Ever. That's against policy and common sense." Angela stood there quietly, not trying to make a scene. She didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. I told her, Angela said softly, that it was real, that she could verify it. But she didn't even listen. The manager looked at her with genuine regret. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Please come with me. Let's fix this. As they walked toward his office, Angela glanced back once. Linda's face was pale, but she still wore that stubborn look of pride, the kind people wear when they know they're wrong but refuse to admit it. Inside the office, the manager gently asked Angela to explain what had happened. She did, her voice trembling at times but always composed. Mr. Collins listened carefully, nodding, occasionally glancing toward the glass window where curious eyes peered in. When she was done, he sighed deeply. Ma'am, I can't express how sorry I am. That behavior is unacceptable. I'll personally make sure this is corrected. He took the torn pieces of the check, pieced them together gently on the desk, and then typed something quickly on his computer. After a few minutes, he smiled reassuringly. We'll reissue the check and deposit it directly to your husband's account. I promise. Angela felt a small wave of relief, but the pain still lingered. Thank you, she said quietly. Mr. Collins nodded. And please know, this is not how we treat our customers. I'll be having a very serious talk with my staff. Angela gave a weak smile. I hope no one else has to go through this, she said. As she left the office, the atmosphere in the bank was still thick with tension. Some customers gave her nods of support. Others whispered in disbelief, but the story wasn't over. Not even close, because as Linda sat behind the counter, trying to shake off the guilt that was slowly creeping in, she looked up at the large digital billboard above the teller stations, the one that displayed the bank's advertisements. And there, smiling proudly from the screen, was David Roberts, the man she had just called a fraud. The quiet hum of the bank returned, but it wasn't the same as before. The air still carried tension, that heavy kind of silence that lingers after something wrong has been done. Angela stood near the manager's office door, clutching the torn pieces of her husband's check like pieces of her broken pride. Inside the office, Mr. Collins, the branch manager, looked genuinely troubled. He was a calm man, known among his staff for being fair and level-headed, but as he held the torn check in his hands, even he couldn't hide the disbelief on his face. Linda tore this? He asked again, as if hoping Angela might correct him. Angela nodded slowly. Yes, she said softly. Right in front of everyone. Mr. Collins sighed deeply and shook his head. This is completely unacceptable, he muttered. We're supposed to serve people with respect, not embarrass them. Angela sat quietly in the chair across from his desk. She wasn't angry, just deeply hurt. Her heart was heavy. She looked out the glass window of the office, watching the same teller who had humiliated her continue her work as if nothing had happened. Mr. Collins gently placed the torn check on his desk. Ma'am, he said, his tone respectful, I'm truly sorry. No one should be treated that way, especially here. This isn't who we are as a bank, and it's definitely not what we stand for. Angela gave a faint nod, still fighting the lump in her throat. I didn't come here for trouble, she whispered. I just came to deposit a check. My husband works hard for everything he earns. He helps people in our community, even this bank. He's done charity events with your organization. Mr. Collins paused, his eyes widening slightly. Your husband works with our community program? Yes, Angela said, pulling out a small folded brochure from her purse. It had a photo of her husband, David Roberts, standing beside volunteers at a local food drive, with the bank's logo printed proudly at the bottom. The manager stared at the photo for a moment, realization dawning on his face. David Roberts? He repeated. Oh my goodness, I've met him. He spoke at our annual fundraiser last year. Angela nodded slowly. That's him. Mr. Collins leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. This makes it even worse, he said quietly. Your husband is one of the reasons our bank has such a good image in this community. He's a partner in our outreach programs. Angela's voice trembled slightly. I tried to tell her that, she said. But she didn't listen. She looked at me and assumed something else. The manager's expression hardened. That's not something I can overlook. He stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the office door. Angela watched as he opened it, his calm professionalism replaced by quiet determination. The entire bank lobby turned its attention toward him. Linda, he said firmly, his voice carrying across the room. May I speak to you for a moment? Linda looked up, startled. Yes, sir, she said, trying to sound casual. Now, please, Mr. Collins said, gesturing toward his office. The room went silent again. Customers pretended to look at their phones or fill out forms, but everyone was listening. Angela could see the fear flicker across Linda's face as she followed the manager inside. When the door closed, Mr. Collins didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were calm, but they carried weight. Do you understand what you've done? He asked, showing her the torn check. Linda's face turned pale. I was just following procedure, she stammered. It looked suspicious. You didn't mean? He cut her off gently but firmly. You tore up a valid check without verification. You embarrassed a customer, and not just any customer. The wife of one of our community partners. You judged her before you even looked at the details. Linda's lips parted in shock. Wait, her husband? Yes, Mr. Collins said sharply. David Roberts. You've seen his face before. It's on the billboard above the teller stations. He represents this bank in our charity ads. Linda froze. Her mind replayed the last few moments. The way she had spoken, the tone she'd used, the look she'd given Angela. She felt the color drain from her face. I didn't know, she whispered. That's exactly the point, the manager said, his tone softer now. You didn't know it because you didn't care to look. You assumed. You disrespected someone who walked in here trusting us. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, she murmured. I didn't mean to hurt her. I was just trying to be careful. Being careful doesn't mean being cruel, Mr. Collins said quietly. I'll have to report this incident, but before I do, you should know. An apology might not fix everything, but it's the right place to start. Outside the office, Angela waited, her heart pounding. She could see the outline of their shadows moving behind the frosted glass. Then the door opened slowly. Linda stepped out first, her face red and her eyes downcast. She walked toward Angela, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Ma'am, she said softly, her voice trembling, I owe you an apology. I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I'm truly sorry. Angela looked at her for a long moment. There was pain in her eyes, but also grace. I forgive you, she said finally. But please, never treat anyone like that again. You never know who's standing in front of you or what they carry in their heart. Linda nodded quickly, tears escaping down her cheeks. I won't, she whispered. Mr. Collins stepped forward and gave Angela a kind smile. We'll make this right, ma'am, he said. And thank you for handling this with dignity. Angela smiled faintly. Sometimes, she said quietly, dignity is all we have. She turned to leave, her steps slow but steady. The lobby, once tense and heavy, now felt lighter, filled with silent respect. Everyone watched her go, not out of pity, but admiration. No one knew that this simple moment, a check, a misunderstanding, a torn piece of paper, would soon become a story that spread far beyond the walls of that small-town bank. Because sometimes, life doesn't teach lessons in classrooms. It teaches them in moments like this where kindness meets ignorance, and grace wins every time. The sound of Angela's footsteps faded as she left the bank manager's office, heading toward the exit. The air in the lobby still felt heavy, filled with whispers and the quiet tapping of keyboards that tried to pretend nothing had happened. But something had changed, something deep and unseen. Linda, the teller, stood frozen at her counter. Her mind replayed every moment of the past 15 minutes like a film she couldn't pause. The sound of the paper tearing, the shock on Angela's face, the gasps from customers, it all echoed in her ears. She had made a mistake. A big one. Her hands, once confident, now trembled slightly as she tried to refocus on her computer screen, but her eyes kept wandering, to the glass door where Angela had just walked out, to the desk where the torn check had lain, and finally, to the large digital billboard mounted above the teller stations. It was one of those rotating displays that flashed the bank's community messages and advertisements. Normally, she never paid much attention to it. But at that exact moment, as if fate had decided to teach her a lesson, the screen changed. Her heart skipped a beat. There, smiling proudly from the glowing screen, was a familiar face, one she had seen countless times on local posters, charity flyers, and even the news. David Roberts. The bold letters beneath the image read, Community Hero, Bringing Hope to Families. Together, Linda's breath caught in her throat. The man on the screen was Angela's husband. The same name printed on the check she had just torn in half. Her body froze, her mind racing. No, that can't be him, she thought, but the more she stared, the more undeniable it became. The photo showed David standing beside a group of smiling children, holding a plaque of appreciation. His eyes, kind, warm, full of pride, were the same ones she had seen in the photo the manager held moments earlier. Linda's chest tightened. A wave of cold washed over her, followed by something heavier: shame. She suddenly remembered how Angela had said, "My husband works with your bank's charity program." She remembered ignoring it. She remembered not caring. Now that single moment of arrogance burned inside her like a flame. The whispers in the lobby grew louder. People had noticed the billboard too. A woman in line whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the man she was talking about? The one on the check?" Linda's ears turned red. Her throat felt dry. She tried to focus on her work, but the screen kept catching her eye. David's smile seemed to stare right through her, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. Mr. Collins, the manager, stepped out of his office again. His face was stern, but his voice was calm. "Linda," he said quietly, "take a break." She nodded quickly, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes, sir." As she stepped away from the counter, she passed by the waiting area where a few customers still sat. Some looked at her with disapproval, others with silent judgment. Linda could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on her. She wanted to disappear, to take back what she'd done. She walked into the small break room at the back of the bank and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking. The image of Angela's face, calm, hurt, but dignified, replayed over and over in her mind. She didn't even shout, Linda whispered to herself. She just looked at me. That look had said everything. For the first time in a long while, Linda saw herself clearly, not the professional, efficient teller she liked to imagine, but a woman who had let her prejudice control her actions. She thought about all the times she had made snap judgments about people based on how they looked, how they dressed, how they spoke. Maybe she had done it without realizing, but today it had gone too far. She closed her eyes and whispered, "What have I done?" At that moment, the door opened quietly. Mr. Collins walked in, holding a cup of water. He placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Take a sip," he said softly. Linda obeyed silently, her hands trembling as she held the cup. "I saw you looking at the screen," he said after a moment. "You understand now, don't you?" Linda nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I do," she whispered.
"I can't believe I treated her that way."
She was so calm, so polite. "I was awful." Mr. Collins sighed. "It's never too late to learn, Linda. But you have to remember, every person who walks through that door deserves respect. You don't know their story. You don't know what they've been through." "I know," she said, wiping her tears. "I just assumed the worst. I thought I was being careful, but I was just being cruel." The manager's tone softened. "Owning it is the first step. Now you need to make it right." Linda looked up at him, her eyes red but determined. "How?" she asked quietly. "Start with an apology," he said. "Not because she's connected to the bank. Not because of who her husband is, but because it's the right thing to do." Linda nodded slowly, the weight of the moment sinking in. She realized that the check she tore wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of trust. And she had destroyed it without a second thought. When she finally stepped back into the lobby, the billboard was still there, David Roberts's face glowing under the soft lights of the bank. She paused for a moment, looking up at it again, and in that quiet second she whispered to herself, "I judged his wife. Without knowing, I was disrespecting the very man this bank honors." It was a moment she would never forget, a harsh, necessary awakening that would stay with her far longer than any punishment ever could. Because some lessons don't come from training or manuals. They come from mistakes, and the pain of realizing how easily we can forget to see the human being standing right in front of us. Linda stood near the counter, frozen in place. The image of David Roberts still glowed on the big screen above her, his warm smile, his confident eyes, the kind of face that made people trust and admire him. The words beneath the photo read, "Together we build hope, in partnership with bank name." Every second she looked at it, the more her chest tightened. It was like the billboard itself was silently asking her, "Do you see now?" She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. The image was too powerful, too painful. Each second reminded her of what she had done. Not just the act of tearing a check, but tearing apart a moment of someone's dignity. Customers continued their business as if nothing had happened, but for Linda, everything had changed. The air felt heavy, the light too bright and the sounds too loud. Even the tapping of the keyboards from nearby tellers sounded distant, like echoes underwater. Her throat was dry. Her palms were damp. Her mind raced with the memory of Angela's eyes, and steady, hurt but calm. That quiet dignity haunted her more than if Angela had yelled or demanded revenge. That silence had power. It spoke louder than anger ever could. She reached for her water bottle, but her hands shook so much that she nearly dropped it. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mr. Collins, the branch manager, step out of his office again. He wasn't angry now. His face showed disappointment, yes, but also something more human. Understanding, maybe. He walked toward her slowly, and the few customers still in line instinctively stepped aside, as if giving space for something important to happen. "Linda," he said softly. She turned toward him, her lips pressed tightly together, afraid that if she opened her mouth, her guilt would spill out as tears. Mr. Collins nodded toward the digital billboard, where David Roberts' face still smiled above them. "You've seen it now, haven't you?" he asked gently. Linda's voice came out in a whisper. "Yes, sir. I have, and—" She took a shaky breath. "I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who she was. I just saw what I wanted to see. I judged her before I even listened." Mr. Collins didn't speak for a moment. He simply looked at her, letting her words settle in the air. Then he said quietly, "That's the kind of mistake that changes people, if they let it." Linda swallowed hard. "I want to make it right," she said. "But how do you fix something like that?" The manager sighed softly. "You start by being honest with yourself. You made a mistake, a bad one. You can't undo it, but you can learn from it. And when she comes back, and because she will, you'll have a chance to say what needs to be said." Linda nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I'll do anything to apologize," she whispered. Mr. Collins placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then mean it," he said, "because words without sincerity are just noise." He walked away, leaving Linda standing there beneath the billboard. She looked up once more at David's smiling face. There was something painfully ironic about it. The man she had indirectly insulted was now staring down at her every move, reminding her of what she had become in that moment. As she stared, something shifted inside her, a realization that went beyond embarrassment or fear of losing her job. It was deeper than that. It was guilt, not the kind that fades, but the kind that teaches. She thought about Angela again, the way she had held herself with quiet grace, even when humiliated in front of strangers. She remembered how Angela hadn't shouted or cursed, how she had simply said, "You never know who's standing in front of you." Linda closed her eyes. That line cut through her heart. She thought of her own life and how many times she had looked at people and assumed things. A man in old clothes must be broke. A young girl paying in cash must be suspicious. A woman with a worn purse must not belong in a respectable place like this. Now she saw the truth. It was never about policies or being careful, it was about pride. The quiet, ugly kind that hides behind excuses. She walked slowly toward the customer seating area and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't care who saw her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a bank teller. She felt like a human being who had failed another human being. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The billboard changed slides several times, new faces, new slogans, but every time it returned to David Roberts, her stomach twisted with guilt. Finally, Mr. Collins returned from his office. "Linda," he said, his tone softer now, "I've spoken with the regional office about what happened. We're arranging a personal apology from the bank to Mrs. Roberts and her husband. I wanted you to know." Linda nodded silently. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice small. He studied her for a moment, then added, "She didn't ask for anything. Not money. Not even for you to be disciplined. She just said she hoped you'd learn from it." That broke Linda. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "She's kinder than I deserve," she whispered. Mr. Collins gave a faint smile. "That's what makes her stronger than most. As he walked away, Linda remained seated, wiping her tears with a tissue. Her reflection in the shiny marble floor looked unfamiliar, tired, guilty, but humbled. When she finally looked up again, the billboard had returned to David's face. And for the first time, Linda didn't see it as a reminder of her mistake. She saw it as a lesson, one she would carry for the rest of her life. She whispered to herself, "Never again. Never will I let judgment blind me from seeing someone's humanity." And deep inside she meant it, because sometimes the hardest lessons come not from being punished, but from realizing you punished someone who never deserved it. The next morning, the air inside the bank felt different. It wasn't as bright or busy as usual. The employees moved quietly, as if the walls themselves were remembering what had happened the day before. Even Linda, who usually came in with brisk confidence, walked in slower, her heart heavy with the weight of guilt. She hadn't slept much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Angela's face, calm, wounded, and dignified. It wasn't anger that haunted her, but that look of silent disappointment. It was the kind of look that stays in your soul and forces you to face who you really are. Linda had rehearsed 1,000 versions of what she wanted to say if she ever saw Angela again. But words felt so small compared to the harm she had caused. Still, she promised herself that if the chance came, she wouldn't run from it. By mid-morning, the glass doors of the bank opened, and there she was, Angela Roberts. She walked in quietly, holding her purse in one hand and a soft, tired smile on her face. She wasn't there for confrontation. She wasn't even sure why she had come back. Maybe it was because she believed in closure, in giving people the chance to learn from their mistakes, or maybe she just wanted peace in her heart. When Linda saw her, she froze. Her breath caught in her throat and her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it. For a second, she thought about hiding behind the counter, pretending to be busy, but something inside her refused to take the coward's way out. She stood up slowly, her knees weak. "Mrs. Roberts," she said softly, her voice trembling. Angela looked at her, her expression unreadable. "Yes?" Linda swallowed hard. I wasn't sure you'd come back." Angela nodded gently. "I wasn't sure either." There was silence, the kind that feels heavy but honest. Linda took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "Ma'am, I want to say something, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to hear it." Angela didn't speak, only nodded once, giving her the space to continue. "I was wrong," Linda said, her voice cracking. "I was rude, I was unfair, and I disrespected you in a way that no one should ever experience. I judged you without knowing you. I assumed the worst when all you did was walk in here with kindness." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I tore that check because I didn't see you. I only saw what my own prejudice made me see, and for that, I'm ashamed." Angela's eyes softened slightly, but she remained silent. Linda continued, her words tumbling out like a confession she'd been holding for years. "I found out who your husband is later that day. I saw his face on the billboard, smiling, helping the very people this bank claims to serve. And when I realized what I'd done, I wanted the ground to open up beneath me. Not because he's someone important, but because you both represent everything I forgot that day. Kindness, patience, and dignity." Tears welled in her eyes now. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Roberts. I embarrassed you and I can't take that back. But I promise I'll never treat anyone that way again. You taught me something I'll never forget, even if you didn't mean to." For a long moment, the bank was silent. Even the customers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. The apology hung in the air, raw, real, and heavy with sincerity. Angela looked at Linda, really looked at her. And for the first time, she didn't see the cold, dismissive teller from yesterday. She saw a woman who was truly remorseful, someone learning a painful but necessary lesson. Angela's voice was calm, almost gentle. "We all make mistakes, Linda. Some big, some small. What matters is whether we learn from them." Linda nodded quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I have," she whispered. "I promise you I have." Angela sighed softly. "You hurt me deeply yesterday. Not because of the check, and that can be replaced, but because of how you made me feel. You made me feel invisible, but standing here now hearing your words, I believe you mean what you say." Linda wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "I do. More than you know." Angela looked down for a moment, then back up with a faint, forgiving smile. "Then I forgive you." Those 3 words hit Linda harder than any punishment ever could. Her shoulders shook and she covered her mouth to keep from crying out loud. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Thank you so much." Angela reached into her purse and handed Linda a small folded piece of paper. "This was the check you tore yesterday." The manager reissued it. "I thought you should see it, so you remember what not to tear next time." Linda let out a soft, tearful laugh through her trembling lips. "I'll never forget," she said. "Not this check, not this lesson, not you."